This is Hot Mic and I'm Nidhi Razdan. Ukraine today, Taiwan tomorrow? Well, could Russia's actions and its bloody war inspire China to do the same thing to Taiwan? That's the big question. Today we're looking at how the Russian invasion of Ukraine may actually embolden China in our neighborhood, something that is not good news for India simply because it has battled Chinese advancements on the line of actual control for nearly 2 years now. In a rather aggressive statement that was made just a few days ago, a top Chinese official who also happens to be the country's vice foreign minister said that the creation of groups like the Quad were as dangerous as NATO's eastward expansion in Europe. Could China be preparing the ground to attack Taiwan in the future? Beijing claims full sovereignty over Taiwan, a democracy of almost 24 million people located off the southeastern coast of mainland China. China has openly threatened to forcibly reunite the two parts, although both countries have been governed separately for more than 70 years. Chinese officials have blamed NATO's expansion for triggering the crisis in Ukraine. So you can connect the dots there. Speaking in Beijing, China's Vice Foreign Minister Li Yucheng said that the Ukraine crisis provides a mirror for us to observe the situation in the Asia Pacific and that the region faces two opposite choices. Should we build an open and inclusive family for win-win cooperation or go for small blocks based on the Cold War mentality and group confrontation? Mr. Lee compared NATO's actions in Europe to those of the US in Asia and warned that a full-blown crisis may follow in the region. So why should we take what one Chinese official has said so seriously? Simply because Mr. Lee is considered a rising star in China's foreign policy establishment. He also served as China's ambassador to India from 2014 to 2016, initially when Mr. Modi was Prime Minister, and he could be promoted to Foreign Minister of China in a matter of months. Also, Sunday's PLA Daily, which happens to be the People's Liberation Army's official newspaper in Mandarin, it has also backed this view taken by Mr. Lee about the Quad and NATO. The newspaper has said that the US is creating gangs in the Indo-Pacific to build a NATO-like structure and has described the Quad as being a part of it. This is the first time that China has framed the Ukraine crisis in terms of NATO's eastward expansion, linking it to US strategy in the Indo-Pacific, including the Quad, of which India is a part. Now, why is China so worked up about the Quad? Well, to understand that, one has to understand what the Quad actually is. It is essentially a group of nations comprising India, the United States, Japan, and Australia called the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, or the Quad. These four countries came together essentially to take on the rising threat of China in this region. The aim was to establish a rules-based international order. Now, the Quad is not formally structured like a formal decision-making body, so it doesn't have a secretariat, it doesn't have, all those trimmings. But the focus is on expanding existing agreements between member countries and highlighting their shared values. The group's primary objectives, at least on paper, are maritime security, combating COVID, especially vaccine cooperation, climate change, investments, technology innovations. But let's face it, the main thing that binds the Quad countries together is the rising threat of China. And that's why China doesn't like the Quad. Last month, Foreign Minister Jaishankar had said that the Asian NATO analogy is a lazy one, pointing out that India was not a treaty ally of the US. He said, we're not a treaty ally. It doesn't have a treaty, a structure, a secretariat. It's kind of a 21st century way of responding to a more diversified and dispersed world. Now, India is actually the only Quad member that has not openly condemned Russia's actions in Ukraine. In fact, India has abstained more than once at different forums at the United Nations on this issue. This has led to the speculation of a rift or a disquiet within the Quad on India's position. The United States, for instance, has said, while on one hand it understands India's point of view, on the other, we've seen the White House press secretary talking about countries wanting to stand on the right side of history when this event is written about in history books. Is she suggesting that India may be on the wrong side of history? Both the Japanese and Australian prime ministers who've held meetings with Prime Minister Modi in the last few days have made very strong, tough statements against Russia's actions. The Prime Minister himself has refrained from doing that in his opening comments. But Australia has also been at pains to say that the Quad understands India's view and where it is coming from, and in fact appreciates the possibly mediatory role that India could be playing. Many foreign policy analysts believe that what happens in Taiwan will likely be influenced by what happens in Ukraine. So, if Russia succeeds in getting all of Ukraine under its control, then Taiwan could be in serious trouble at some point. But it's not that simple because China also knows there are huge risks involved if it goes in for an invasion. One factor that would make Beijing hesitate into going in for a full scale invasion would be the threat of Western sanctions, especially if they do succeed against Russia. China's economy is much, much more globalized today, and sanctions could potentially hurt their economic progress if they were to happen. The other factor is the strong resistance and surprising resistance that Ukraine has put up to the mighty Russians. One poll published in Taiwan this week shows that nearly 3/4 of the population there is willing to fight a Chinese invasion. But China also has time on its side. They may take many years to actually invade Taiwan, and if they do, in the meantime, they'll work on building up their military, building up their economy, and perhaps studying what went right and what went wrong with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Coming back to India, so far India has maintained its position of not openly condemning Russia. But a close Russia-China relationship makes New Delhi wary as well. Putin and Xi have described their friendship as one that has no limits. India will watch this space with concern and very closely. But could there also be a silver lining in all of this? India's former Foreign Secretary Shyam Saran has written that given that the Russian invasion has met with such stiff resistance, China may want to reach out to India and show that two major Asian powers are thinking along the same lines. In which case, he says, there might just be an olive branch to India to get Prime Minister Modi to take part in the upcoming BRICS summit. And if that means status quo ante at the India-China border, it would be one of the few positives in this dark war.